Hello, hello. So, welcome. Today, I want to demystify this rhetoric that politicians have been running around with that Kenya was at par, or the Kenyan economy surpassed that of Singapore in 1963 and 1965. Yes, it is true that the GDP of Kenya in 1963 and 1965 surpassed the GDP of Singapore. However, there have been claims by some political officials that Singaporean officials traveled to Kenya during this time to benchmark or copy the development strategies of Kenya. That's actually a historical myth that even you can find the heads of state selling out to the people. And it's not true actually. It's true that the GDP of Kenya was slightly higher than that of Singapore in 1963 and 1965. Now, this is the real data. This is according to the historical data from the World Bank and the nominal economies of both nations. In 1963, Kenya's total nominal GDP stood at 926.6 million US dollars, while Singapore was 917.6 million US dollars. In 1965, Kenya's GDP grew to 998 million US dollars, while that of Singapore was 974 million US dollars. So, let's demystify this myth that politicians have been running around with. That Kenya was doing well than Singapore. Look at the population of Kenya in 1963 was 8.5 million people, while that of Singapore, it was just a tiny island city-state with fewer than 2 million residents. So let's look at the GDP per capita, or that's the income per person. So in 1965, the GDP per capita for Singapore was roughly 516 US dollars, while that of Kenya was only 109 US dollars. So, this means the average Singaporean already had nearly 5 times the income of an average Kenyan at independence. Why? Because the population of Singapore was only 2 million people, while that of Kenya was 8.5 million at independence. So this means Singapore was richer than Kenya. Yeah. Kenya was not richer than Singapore. Singapore was richer than Kenya. And it still stands to this point. I think today it's way more richer than Kenya. So, did Singapore benchmark Kenya? Did the officials from Singapore come to Kenya to benchmark on some of the development strategies? The truth is no. Actually, there is no historical record of Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew or Singaporean delegations visiting Kenya to study or copy its economic model at independence. The myth likely stems from two historical facts that became twisted over time in Kenyan political rhetoric. the British connection. Both countries gained independence from Great Britain around the same time. Kenya, 1963, that was from the British, and Singapore in 1963, and subsequently from the Malaysian in 1965. So this rhetoric that's Singapore, that Kenya was richer than Singapore at independence is actually not true. It's just a myth and something that politicians are running with, forgetting that Singapore was richer than Kenya. So we will have to look at what did actually Singapore do to be way richer than Kenya. We cannot compare the technology in Singapore with what we have in Kenya. I think it's like 10 times the GDP of Singapore. The population of Kenya right now is about 10 times that of Singapore. Tune in for the next session where we shall be digging deeper into some of the steps that Singapore leaders or Singapore as a state did to achieve such a big economy that everyone is talking about in the world today. Thank you. Subscribe, like, and share to receive more insights from this channel. Kwaheri for now.